Okay, for this next part, we're going to start to play with some fun elements that you can put into your watercolor. Now, if you've ever tried watercolor before, you probably know all about putting salt in it and how it will create crystals. As the water dries, the salt will soak some up and it leaves little crystal effects, so it's really cool. You can play with different types of salt, so I have some more coarse this is table, this is more coarse ground salt. And I've already done a circle, and the thing is, when you add salt, it needs to still be wet. So your painting still needs to be wet. And I purposefully made this side much, much wetter than this side. In fact, I think this side, no, it's still wet. So the perfect time to add salt is when your paper is not like this, where you've got a puddle of a lot of water. It's actually best to do it when your paper is about like right here, so it's shiny, but it's not sopping wet, because what will happen is if you put salt in and it's sopping wet, the water will evaporate all into that salt crystal and pretty much dissolve it, and you'll be left with nothing, or a very small effect, not what you're going for. So perfect will probably be right in this range. This is starting to get almost too dry. This is perfect range, and this is probably too wet. But of course, as soon as I say that, it'll probably work perfectly. So what I like to do is put salt into a little dish, and then I just pinch it out, and you just drop it wherever you'd like. And I will also drop in some of this larger salt, just so you can see the difference. Now the larger salt might actually work down where that's really wet down there, because it's a larger grain. So we'll see. And I use the hair dryer a lot to dry my paintings because I'm a completely impatient person. But with salt, it is a good idea to let it dry on its own. So try not to use the hair dryer. I think it works better if it just dries on its own. So we'll see what this looks like when it dries. So our painting has dried, and I've got it close up here so you can see. So this was the area where it was really, really wet, and as you can see, here it kind of congealed and kind of made a mess. So this is where I was saying if it's too wet, it won't quite do what you want it to do. It still made some effects, so still nice. And then through here, it did great, and up here it did really well too. So there's this point of perfect wetness where it's just almost dry, I think, is the perfect time to add your salt. And this is a really good effect. It looks like a starry sky. So it's a great way to create a star effect and also a snow effect, and anything underwater as well would look really cool. And to get the salt off, once it dries, excuse me, once it dries, you want to make sure your painting is completely dry, and then you can just rub it and the salt will come right off. All right, next we're going to play with alcohol. Okay, so we're going to add some alcohol to one of our planets here. I've already painted it. The planet is still wet. Once again, you want to make sure your planet is wet when you add alcohol. And what I like to do is just pour a little alcohol into a container, just so that I don't have to dip into this weird container. So I just use, I have this inexpensive small brush. I think it's a number 2. Oh, it's a number 1. So any small brush will work, and you can use your regular brush. It won't hurt it. I just dip into the alcohol and do a little drop and release, and ta-da! So anywhere this is wet, it will create that effect. And you can grab more paint or more alcohol to make bigger ones. You can do a little less for smaller. And you can see how this could really come in handy for galaxy painting, because it looks like starbursts or planets, or it looks like outer space. So it's a lot of fun just to do this. I mean, just to take a wet planet and just go crazy adding alcohol dots. There's something very satisfying about it. So there you go. There is our alcohol in wet paint. It pushes the pigment away and creates these wonderful little circles. So I will say, you can already see it happening. This area here was very wet with paint and water. And if it's really, really wet, it will start to collapse on itself. So your little circles will start, the paint and the water will start to come back over into the alcohol. So once again, there is like a perfect moment to add alcohol, and it's when it's not very sopping wet. Over here, it's kind of in that mid-range, which would be a perfect place and perfect time to add some alcohol. And what you can do also to kind of get some control over it is just kind of watch it, just monitor it as it dries. And once it starts to dry up a bit, you can come back in and just add more alcohol. And the alcohol will evaporate and dry, so we don't have to worry about it affecting our painting. So there you go. Have fun with that.